Great to have everybody here. I will start by sharing my screen. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay. Welcome to August 24th, the Rural Community Health Worker Network webinar, where today we are going, oh, this isn't going to work for me today, is it? Where today we are going to discuss, oh my goodness, now I'm having a moment. This is horrible. We're going to discuss the client and community root causes. But to get us started, just a little bit of background about RCHWN. We are a national organization that was founded by CHWs for CHWs. We are a peer-to-peer network, and we are excited to have all of you on the call. We are working on our strategies of the I'm a CHW awareness campaign, along with networking for peer-to-peer support and continuing education, which is why you are here today, along with our local core outreach. Our vision is to grow a national community of CHWs for CHWs, along with awareness to build allies and advocates that celebrate CHWs to create visibility for their contributions. At this point, I would like to introduce you to our speaker for today, which is Andrea Krotzer-Burton. She is going to do community and client root causes. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I will regulate that for everybody, and we can get started.
I think everybody on the call knows who I am, so I don't think I need to probably do much of an intro, but for those of you on the call that don't know me or maybe have forgotten me, which I don't know how that could be possible because I'm not easily to forget, but I'm Andrea Krotzer-Burton. I am the VP of Training and Master CHW for Everyday Life Consulting. I do a lot of work with the RCHWN as well as the CORE project. And as always, I am more than delighted to be here with all of you today. Next slide, please. So here is just a small sample of our team here at Everyday Life. We have first and foremost Shannon Liaski, our visionary for Everyday Life, and our lead consultant. Then you have myself, who, of course, just introduced. In the center there is Elfrida Dysart Drake, and she is one of our national CHW trainers, as well as a CHW herself. Next to her, we have Sarah Kyle. She is our Bridges Out of Poverty expert, as well as executive director for 211. Last pictured here, but not least, is Andrea Foster, and she is our diversity, equity, inclusion for the LGBTQ plus community. And she is our Jedi Master. Next slide, please. So for our icebreaker, I thought I would switch it up just a tiny bit today, and I am going to do Name That Tune. So I'm going to share a tune, a throwback from the olden days for some of you young folks that are on. So when you hear the tune, go ahead and share in the chat the artist and the name of the song if you know what that is.
I don't hear anything.
Andrew, we don't hear it.
You don't hear it?
Nope.
It's
No,
not
ma'am.
coming through now.
We see you humming.
Why don't you just go ahead and sing that for us, Andrea, if you please?
Yeah, nope, not going to do that because that's not one of my specialties.
Unfortunately, you were not moving your lips, so we could not tell.
Yeah, hold on 1 second. Nothing?
Nope. So the song title is The Sound of Silence. I win. Let's go.
Well, hey, Alazar, that is not nice. Actually, the song itself was Phil Collins, and it was In the Air Tonight. I thought I'd throw off some of the younger folks because it's one of his older songs, but one of my very favorite artists of all times. So Phil Collins was, love that song. Yes. So Phil Collins was the choice of the name that tune today. So unfortunately, I apologize that it didn't work. But so on to the next slide, please, Rebecca. Well, Whitney, that might be because you have an old aunt, but technically you are younger, and most of the time you play anything that's pre-2000 for you younger folks are like, I've never heard of that before. What is that? Right? Okay. So as you see here, defined root causes are defined essentially as a factor that caused a non-conformance and should be permanently eliminated through process improvement. The root cause is the core issue, the highest level cause that sets in motion the entire cause and effect reaction that ultimately leads to the problem or problems, as we all know, with our clients. Typically, they have more than one, what we call social determinant of health. In the CHW community, especially nationally, social determinants of health right now are really ramping up as being nope, go backwards, please. Really ramping up to be that vital piece that we really start to address in the work that we're doing. And in order to be super effective as a CHW with our clients, as well as our communities, is we really have to understand what those different layers are and what are the contributing factors to those root causes. Okay. So during the webinar, we will be asking 3 of the leading questions to get to the root causes, and we will also look at the root cause analysis tool that can be used and that we actually have been using quite a bit as of late in some of the CHW work that we've been doing. So next slide, please.
Nice phone, but I can't see the slides. I just hear it. Oh, maybe we combine the two.
Okay, so somebody can't see the slides, Rebecca.
Who doesn't see the slides?
Okay, it wasn't somebody that was on the phone. It's somebody that's on the phone. So today's objectives, and more importantly, what we're going to discuss more intense, is working through root causes, providing those upstream approaches as CHWs, and the importance of needing to be able to do that effectively. 3 questions to ask, using and understanding the ecological model, and then tools to use, or a tool that we will actually show you here on the slide and walk through it. And it is a really effective tool to use to be able to pull out each social determinant and treat it as if it's its own case within the case. Next slide, please. So obviously, most of us do screeners already. They're starting to introduce more screeners that are specifically geared towards social determinants of health. I also like to talk about pulse surveys, and these surveys are things that you can do, which are just very simple questions you can have that you keep, you have available to you that you use regularly when working with your clients. And why it's called a pulse survey is because it essentially just keeps a pulse on them and their situation and their production with their situation. Okay, so you do your initial screeners, so you don't need to screen them every single time with a full screener, but some minimal screeners are necessary to keep a pulse on that situation. So you're always being able to help them to understand, as well as yourself, working with them in that upstream approach, because to know is to avert, or to handle something as soon as you find out about it is going to be a better way to deal with a situation that arises than waiting until it becomes a crisis. Because as you all know, one of the things that I always say to all CHWs that I work with, an individual's crisis is not your emergency. And that's what that happens very regularly with each and every one of us. A client comes in on a Thursday afternoon, they have a shut-off notice for their water, and now they need to have funding to help pay for it, or a resource. And the chances of being able to have it paid for or get help referring them to a resource is very challenging at that late hour. But it's their crisis. And now that you're the CHW, they want it to become your emergency. And that just isn't the case. And then, of course, asking the proper questions each time. We always have to make sure that we're asking the when, the why, and the what. And sometimes how. But those three standard words to use when asking those questions. When did you receive that letter? Why did you wait so long? What prevented you from calling me before today? Let's say, right? We have to have them admit to us and really get down to the nitty gritty in order for us to be able to rectify the situation. Because what's going to happen is they're going to continue to do what they're doing, and they're going to continue to get what they get. And we're going to continue down that same path. It's going to be that cycle that we're all on. And what happens to the CHW when we're on that site? When we become part of that cycle for the clients? Does anyone have feedback on that?
We can get frustrated for sure with folks and maybe resentful, and if that continues, that can damage our relationship with that client. And if it happens with a bunch of clients, it can lead to burnout.
Correct. So what happens when, or why do you feel like if we're not doing more of these upstream approaches with our clients from the very beginning, what do you think is some of the contributing factors that cause us not to be able to take that approach from the beginning? Do you think it's time frame? Because I personally know that when I'm out doing some of the CHW work and making the phone calls, I'm making just as many phone calls that are coming in, and I really have to meet a certain, I think that I'm going to be able to talk to this client for 30 minutes, but in reality, it's a 60-minute phone conversation, because they may have initially stated that this, and this is the issue that they need to talk about. But in reality, they've got 6 to 7 things that are going on. So that initial visit is really much more lengthy than what we have scheduled for. So I think what happens is we inundate ourselves with these 30-minute appointments, or these times that we think, well, it'll be a quick phone call, but it ends up being a much more in-depth issue. I know when I had the opportunity to work for 211, for instance, I know that for that, it's calls that come in, but you get these calls that come in and they think that they have one specific need. And before you hang up, one of the things that we say is there anything else I can help you with, or any other resources that you might need? And all of a sudden, that question, for whatever reason, opens up a whole nother set of situations, issues, and concerns that they have that they want to have help with. So initially, a phone call that should take 7 to 10 minutes takes 15 to 30, right? So we're not really properly giving ourselves the proper amount of time to really address the issues the way that we need to really get to the root causes.
And that
I
can
would
be
like to
uncomfortable,
pull,
don't you think, Andrea?
pardon me?
I said, don't you think that sometimes maybe the reluctance to get upstream could be at least partially related to CHWs not being as comfortable having those discussions as they are, because it's easier to give a guy a fish than it is to teach him to fish, especially if that guy or gal doesn't want to learn how to fish. You know what I mean? And so getting, holding them accountable and really figuring out, why does this keep happening, or why did you wait this long, or what have you done, to prevent this? That can be a little less comfortable, and you don't get that instant gratification necessarily like you do when you hand them a check, or something
So
like that.
thank you for bringing that up. And I think that that's a very important point, because it is true. We all want to have that feel good moment, right? We all want to see if someone has an immediate need that they have, like say food insecurity, right? We can still get the feel good by helping them reach that immediate need. But what we need to take a look at as CHWs from the community and the client perspective as well is something's causing that. And until we know what that cause is, we're going to continue to have those effects. And so we can give them that one-time feel good, but for the future and longevity, and to help promote that self-efficacy, getting to the root cause at the very beginning is super important. And when I talk to CHWs, and I've talked to them nationally a lot this year, one of the things that they always say is they just don't get to the root cause, and they have clients that come back 4 to 5 times for the same type of resource. It seems to be monthly. Well, then you're not getting to the root cause to try to rectify that issue that's really causing that food insecurity, right? Because what we're thinking of here is long-term and building that self-sufficiency. It's not ever going to be a one and done, because these clients are going to be with you most cases 6 months, 12 months, sometimes longer, sometimes a lifetime, depending on what organization and what program you work for. Right? So that's why these pulse surveys are also very important, because that helps the individual that you work with to understand when something does come up, it's going to become part of their routine, part of their knowledge. They're going to automatically contact their CHW and say, look, I just got this letter in the mail. I'm not sure what it means. Can we, meet for a half hour to discuss this, or whatever that looks like? And then you have that opportunity to prevent that crisis from becoming your emergency. Next slide, please. So as you all know, the above the surface is those social determinants, right? Those are those problem areas. That's what we call as social determinants. So a lot of offices, a lot of organizations, whomever it may be, are starting to do a really great job as to coming up with the social determinants of health factors. But what's below the surface? Those are the root causes. It's similar to the iceberg picture. And I don't know if you've ever seen the iceberg picture before, but there's a very large iceberg that's floating in the Arctic Ocean. You see you see a massive part above the surface that looks, to the eye, the human eye, looks huge, right? But really, in reality, it's only 10% of the iceberg. The other 90% of the iceberg is below the surface of the water that you don't see unless you actually dive under the water and look in that area, that you can see that other 90%. So most of the time plays a factor. It's difficult to bridge those conversations. And 3, it is very uncomfortable, but it's so necessary to get to the root cause. And the reason why the title of this is community and client is because the client is part of some community. And when we take a look at, and we'll look at a little bit later, when we look at the ecological model, the 4 areas that really affect the social determinants for the individual themselves. And it is 4 different areas, and community is one of the factors. So we have to know what the community factors are as well. because sometimes it's more than just rooted in the center of the individual's life or situation. Some of these factors that play a role is the community. Now, just because it's really easy to remember, without talking about it a lot, but the Flint water crisis. You have individuals who are dealing with or have experienced when they were going through all of this, very at the height of it. The individuals had specific roots that were really causing problems to them in their health and things of that nature. But the real root cause of that was a community factor. So that's where we have to look at those pieces and parts. So remember the tree. I like to draw the tree a lot of times, and I think of myself as like the CHW, as the big trunk of the tree, right? I'm the base of the tree. Now, I am what's going to help fix the roots or help flourish the roots so they're much healthier to help the leaves and the other parts grow, right? And become more healthy. So there you go. You've got the social determinants at the top, the roots at the bottom, the CHW is there in the center, and you're the one that's going to help with both sections. Next slide, please. So some of the questions that I like to ask, and again, it's very hard, especially when you're working quickly. It's a quick phone call. Someone's called you. Maybe you weren't prepared, what have you, to come up with those open-ended questions. It's really important to be prepared with open-ended questions. And actually, I use a note cards in a little binder, in a little ring set. And I actually have these right in front of me when I am making a phone call or when I'm talking on the phone with a client or even on the computer, if we do a virtual meeting. And I've got my little cheat sheets here. And these are some of the things that I have, and there's specific questions listed or that I have specifically to address social determinants of health concerns, such as food insecurity, health benefits, underinsured or uninsured. Those types of things are typical social determinants that we see frequently. So things like, why have you been experiencing food insecurity? Either they're going to say, I don't have enough money at the month to buy food, or they're going to say, my food stamps are running out or my SNAP benefits are running out. Now we're going to understand, okay, is it an underemployment issue, right? Because if you're paying for food on your own, then we got to look at your employment factor or other things. If it's a SNAP benefit, how are you spending those? What's happening here? Because we know that the typical family of 4 gets around $700 a month for SNAP benefits. Now I know that things increase, right? But that's quite a bit of money for groceries. Right. So just making sure that you're very knowledgeable about some of these areas. And then again, understanding, you have to then ask the next question, right? What happened to cause food insecurity? Well, my son came over or my sister came over and she didn't have any, formula. So I went and used I took her to the grocery store and bought 4 or 5 cans of formula. Well, we know that formula costs at least $20, $25 a can, right? So if I'm buying those on my SNAP benefits because she let her WIC go and she has, right, then she might need a referral for a CHW or to our program. But we know that that's going to be a good $150, $200 of the SNAP benefits that have gone to another family, which could be an indication of misuse, but we don't want to turn them in. It's just we have to know what's really causing some of these things because we have to help them get through it so it doesn't continue to be on a cycle. Or why haven't you applied for benefits before, right? Some people don't want to come right out the gate and be like, well, I'm poor, or I don't have any money, or whatever. Maybe it's that you ask this question, why haven't you had, applied for benefits before? Or why don't you have? Or why are you uninsured? Well, because I make about $6 too much a month. Well, then let's look into other options and see what's available out there. Let's look and see if we have a federally qualified health center that we could get you in touch with a sliding fee scale, right? So these are the things that are going to automatically trigger us to do the next step. What events have occurred that created this concern? That's going to be a tough question because some of those things might be where and you're going to be able to pick up on body language, right? You're going to be able to pick up on, are they going to shift backwards? Are they going to have big eyes? Are they going to, what's their demeanor? Did it shift at all? So oh, something might have happened here that they don't really want to talk about. So that's going to be an indication for you. Well, maybe I need to change the subject, or maybe I need to change my approach, but I still need to get to this underlying situation because I really want to be able to help them have that long-term success. And then what can we do to prevent this from happening again? This is where we're going to be able to find out their internal strengths and maybe their external. What do they already have going for them that can help them and to prevent this? Will they have you as a CHW? Maybe I'll call you when, at the very beginning of this situation versus near the end. Or maybe next time I will put together, this, that, or the next thing, right? Put together better goals. Or maybe they don't know what they're going to do, and that's going to be helpful for you as the CHW to then look at their situation and go, oh, well, we're going to set a couple goals on that and see if we can work through it this way, right? Because what's going to happen is, it's just going to be the same cycle. And it's just going to be the same stress and pressure on all of the resources that we have available in our communities. If we're continuing to do what we do with the client, then it's going to continue to just be that same exact outcome. And our goal is ultimately to change their outcome long-term. Next slide, please. So, tools that most people use, or I like to use, I know that social determinants of health screeners are screeners that you normally do, or if not normally, they're definitely starting to become an introduction into the organization and the work that you're doing. And it's very important, okay, because we have to know what these look like. And then again, like I said, I like to do pulse surveys or pulse screeners, as some have called them, but you do the initial screener, and then you do an individual few questions on each social determinant to keep a pulse on where they're at and what's going on. The tree diagram, as I showed in the picture prior to that, you can draw the tree, you can list the social determinants, put down and list the root causes underneath. And a lot of times when you have a visual and someone can look at it through that lens and really see it, not just hear it and speak it, it resonates with them as in, oh, I really do have a lot going on that needs to be, I didn't look at it like that before, or I didn't see it like that, right? Pointing it out to them in that visual is super important because it's going to trigger things within them to help make those necessary changes. I like to use the ecological model, and I'm going to introduce to you also today the fishbone diagram, which is a really great diagram that helps you look at all of the social determinants together, but individually, and it helps you to come up with factors that are the causes, and then you can set a plan with the individual and do a step-by-step plan. Any questions so far on anything that I've spoke about? All right, next slide, please. So I put the ecological model in here, and we talk a lot about this, especially in the community health worker curriculum. But I wanted to reiterate this because, again, this is a simple tool that you can use as a CHW, not only to effectively document the things that you've discussed with your clients, but it's going to help you pull those little pieces out so you know how best to work on them. Because like we talked about before, you can do a food pantry, which is an immediate fix, but we still have to address that food insecurity long-term, especially if it's 2 or more times. So you can still do that one referral to the food pantry, but it's hopes that we're going to be able to come up with some things that are going on that are causing these issues. And we're going to be able to look at that and have a long-term solution, right? So we have to take a look at what's the individual doing themselves. That's the that's relevant to these root causes, or a factor of these root causes. And then, do they have healthy relationships, or is the relationships themselves helping to create some of these issues for the client situation? And then I talked a little bit about it earlier, but the community. I look at when I use the ecological model, I use it in a twofold way, like a double-edged sword, if you will. I look at how's the individual affecting the community, but what are the community factors that are affecting the individual situation? And then if we look at the societal or policy or the state, or sometimes we look at it at a national level, but do we have the proper policies in place, right? Do we as CHWs need to be a part of certain forums or certain opportunities to say, in my rural community, having this as an income cap or income qualifying factors aren't working? So this really, again, just helps you take a look at, even if you don't do it while the client's specifically sitting with you or in front of you, having the ecological model as a tool to take it next to the chart and next to your notes to say, okay, so here are some of the underlying factors that I want to address next time, right? This is going to help me do my job at a deeper level and more intentional with that upstream approach. Because we want to live in a proactive versus a reactive. And that's the upstream medicine. We want to know what's causing the problem and come up with a solution to help fix it, not just continue to band-aid the problem as it comes up, right? All righty, next slide, please. So this is my favorite diagram. This diagram is structured as a brainstorming tool. This is something that I use, I hadn't used in a while, and then I started to do some community health worker things with the McLaren Health Plan. And I was getting the referrals, and they're coming in, and it's great. But then I started to notice everyone that came through it was very similar, that the very last paragraph said the exact same thing for each person. But one of the things that I needed to do for this was I needed to do a social determinants of health screener. So I could do the social determinants of health screener, right? I can ask the questions and mark the boxes, and that's fine. But is it really enough? Is it enough? Because when we ask the question, like, have you been housing insecure for the last 30 days, or are you fearful of, being in a shelter or homeless in the next 30 days? Yes, no, whatever. But let's say the answer is yes. Okay, well, that's great information. I know you're going to be homeless, but we don't know why. We don't know what happened. We don't know, right? And if we don't know the root causes, if I have a client who is, let's say that the individual is housing insecure and needs to be placed in secured housing, income-based secured housing. So I defer them to Rebecca. She's the housing specialist for my county. Well, then now all of a sudden, Rebecca, my client's all sorts of excited, right? Woohoo! Meets with Rebecca. Rebecca then starts to ask more of those questions, right? And now Rebecca finds out that there's felonies. Their income is too high. All these things. Well, then now Rebecca, I've put it on Rebecca to be the bearer of bad news. because I didn't
Oh.
do my due diligence to ask the necessary questions to get to those causes. And that's the thing that we're missing a lot of times, right? So the diagram here helps you to understand when you take your social determinants of health screener and say, okay, according to the answers, this, and this are the priority needs. I'm going to write that in my blue line. So it's going to help me break each social determinant apart individually. Excuse me. So I know that if I'm looking at chronic disease, underinsured, underemployed, and former incarceration, let's say. Those are 4 areas that I want to address. I know that I need to come up with at least 6 questions total, or 2 per each category or social determinant. That's an open-ended, that's going to give me that in-depth information. So I then can say, you know what, we're going to work through this. Before we can get you into some affordable, proper housing, let's address the former incarceration, let's address the felony, let's address the underemployment, let's see what we can do here, and we're going to be able to go that way, right? And it also helps us to look at this more in detail by saying, okay, so if I'm looking at the social determinants of health here, by looking at using the fishbone diagram, I'm going to be able to look at Maslow's and say, okay, so we all know that if we are broken by way of our basic needs, food, shelter, clothing, air, water, all of those things, I know that I have to address those as well. So I can go, oh, look, we've got 2 from that category. So those are the 2 areas that I really need to address first. And this is how I'm going to do it. And it helps you get the action plan. Because I don't know about you, but for me personally, having tools that cause me to slow down enough to really put notes out there and really look through this critically is going to help me be more effective for my clients long term. And I know that I've put everything out there to be as effective for them as I can be. Because we also can help, we can flip this diagram around and say, look, we've got 3 categories here of social determinants. And we know that the effect, and you can even look at the effect there in the fish's head and write down all the things that are affected by those 3 social determinants. Healthy lifestyle, longevity of life, maybe relationships with family, being able to afford prescriptions. We can go on and on and on. So then they're looking at all of the things that are affected by their social determinants and what can we do to resolve those issues, or at least get them in a phase of being able to maintain at this point in their life to be as comfortable and as effective as it can be. Any questions about the fishbone diagram?
No.
Does anyone see that how this could be a useful tool, serve as a useful tool? Because we're all working in this mode of almost as if we need to be cloned, right? Like we've got lots of different things, lots of different people, lots of different clients, hats, whatever. And again, this just really helps you even make out the plan for to help you come up with a strategic plan for each client, so you know that your time spent with them is really intentional and it's very cut and dry, and there's goals in mind. And not that we want to have this dry relationship with our clients or an unfriendly one in all business. That's not what I'm saying. But when it comes down to it, this is going to hold them and you accountable and help you do your job. I believe, because it has helped me, and it has helped me organize my thoughts and my notes that I'm putting down in the files, so that you can clearly see from start to finish my timeline and what I'm doing here to address the social determinants of health needs. Next slide, please. Yes, that's exactly it. It helps you also have a tool to force the client to look at themselves more in depth and identify their contributions to their issues. And it really is. And it helps to understand that, for instance, I know that we talk a lot about harm reduction, and we use the harm reduction continuum in training. And we talk a lot about, like, if you don't reduce your harm, which is living in the same neighborhood or going back and living with your mom and dad again, or your brother, your friend, or whatever, you're going to continue to be around the same exact situations, which is going to force you to be, tempted with the same things over and over again, right? So we need to reduce those harmful pieces in your life, because that's one of the things that we need to do to get you on a better track. So yes, it's a great accountability tool. So what I would like you to do, or challenge each of you, is to try using the fishbone diagram with a client and just see how it works. Like I said, it's one of those things where, as CHWs, we don't really have like a specific program that we use like doctors do, or nurses, or what have you. We have certain things that we can put in the computer or what have you, but we don't necessarily have our own documenting tools or our own tools that we can use to really help us be more intentional and provide that upstream public health approach to a client situation. So if you find that, and again, I don't know the homework piece, like you don't have to, right? It's not graded or anything, but I like to challenge the CHWs, and I like to encourage them to try new things, because you never know what's going to help you work easier. Like, I talked to a CHW, had a meeting with her yesterday, loving. Had her in one of my first classes a few years ago before COVID. Her current caseload is 150 people.
Wow.
I'm going to say that to you. Active cases right now, 150 people. Now, do you think that if you have a caseload of 150 people, you're going to not overlap some of that information? If you're talking to people back to back, or meeting with people back to back, and you're trying to make sure that you have everything, in your notes organized and things documented and whatnot, that things aren't going to be overlapped slightly, right? These tools are going to help you as a CHW just be more efficient and really be more intentional. So I do encourage you to use some of the tools that we talked about today, especially when it comes to the social determinants of health and getting to the root causes, because ultimately, when we get to the root cause, we solve the problems of the root cause and we heal it, is when we're going to start seeing that self-sufficiency in our clients. And then we're going to start seeing healthier communities as well. Thank you very much. And back to you, Rebecca.
Well, thank you very much, Andrea. I just wanted to give a brief update on what we have going on at RCHWN right now. As a reminder for all of you who are on the call, if you can either put your name and email in the comments so I can send you your CE, or if you would want to email me at rebecca@rchwn.org, I will make sure that in the next few days I get those out to you. As a reminder, our CHW store is live. We have a lot of great items in there. If there is something we don't have, let me know what you want to see. You can also shoot me an email about that, or make a comment on social media. We are in the process of planning our 2023 annual Making Connections retreat. If you are interested in taking part, or wanting to be on a planning committee, or want to make sure you don't miss out on the information as it comes out, also, I'm available at my email, or you can send me a message through our website at any time. We do have membership is opening and continuing to grow. It is a $25 annual membership that includes a great group of CHWs. Most of you all know each other. For the ones who are new, welcome to coming to one of your first webinars. To those who've been here for a while, it is great to have you all back. At this time, I am going to stop the recording. So if you guys want to have some candid, open conversation, you are free to do that without being recorded.